Dear friends, these days the country is celebrating 75 years of the establishment of the Indian Constitution. These are the days, in fact, Independence Day on 15th of August and 26th of January are the 2 days. First, the Independence Day, and the second, the Republic Day of the country. These 2 days are very important in the history of the country. These are the times when we remember, pay our tributes, and show our indebtedness to the great freedom fighters who laid down their lives so that we could breathe in free air and the society could be run as per law, as per the constitutional law of the country. Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Bhagat Singh, Lal Bahadur Shastri, Ram Prasad Bismil, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Chandrasekhar Azad, Lala Lajpat Rai. These are only some of the names of our freedom fighters, the leaders of the freedom movement, who, after a lot of struggle, lots of sacrifices, were able to bring freedom to the country. We have to not only pay tributes to our freedom fighters, but also to those forefathers who gave this country a constitution according to which the country is being run. We have completed 75 years of establishment of our republic and we are entering 76th year. This is the time when we recall that Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, who was chairman of the drafting committee of the Indian Constitution, along with 14 other members of the drafting committee, worked very hard after achieving the freedom and proposed a draft constitution which was put before the constitution parliament, special parliament formed for the purpose of considering this constitution. There, every section of the every article of the constitution that we have was discussed in great detail, and after a lot of deliberations, amendments, it was finally adopted. And It was on 26th of January 1950 when this constitution came into force, making India a republic, which means that the head of the state was not anybody like the King or Queen of England, but a person elected by the people of this country so that it would be a republic run by a constitutional head along with the parliament, which would form laws for the country. Of course, the basic laws, the fundamental laws were laid down in the constitution, but from time to time, as per the needs of the time, various amendments were made in the provisions of the constitution. Of course, there is the Supreme Court also to review the laws passed by Parliament, and the apex court has been entrusted with the function of reviewing these laws so that none of the laws passed by Parliament contravenes the basic structure of the Constitution. It is a democratic country as provided under the Constitution. It has fundamental rights of the people which cannot be curtailed even by a constitutional law. So that is the basic part of the basic structure of the Constitution. There is a central government, there are state governments, and their relations are regulated by the laws laid down in the Constitution. It is a federal structure, and who would make laws for the whole country, who would make laws for the specific states, everything is laid down in the Constitution. Central laws are passed by central parliament. Federal laws are passed by respective states. And there is a concurrent list also which provides for topics on which the states as well as the center can formulate laws. Of course, there is also a provision that if they don't concur, the law made by the Indian Parliament will supersede the law passed by the state. Now, this is the basic structure of the Constitution. But these days, an attempt is being made by some sections, by very powerful sections, backed by the ruling party, who have started talking of altering or changing this constitution. Now, these forces want to bring in Manu Smriti as the law of the country instead of the constitution passed by our forefathers. On this, there are varying opinions, and the secular people who do not believe in the laws made in Manusmriti are opposed to any such change in the constitution. I was saying that these 2 days, Independence Day and the Republic Day, are the days on which we remember our freedom fighters and those who gave us this constitution. There are hundreds and thousands of people who laid down their lives for this freedom, for this constitution. But out of those thousands and thousands of people who sacrificed their lives for the freedom of this country, there are only a few who are remembered. Of course, it is not possible to remember all the thousands and thousands of people, but among the leaders, we forget or forgetting these days one more important leader who seems to have passed into oblivion merely 71 years after his death. We shall be talking of that leader, M.N. Roy, shortly. I am Mahipal Singh from Indian Renaissance Institute, and you are watching this first episode in English on YouTube platform. Of course, the Hindi version has already been released, and today we are going to release this English version of the same. M.N. Roy, Manvendranath Roy, who was born in a village, Arbelia, in 24 Pargana district of West Bengal on 21st March 1887. He was born, his name in the beginning was Narendranath Bhattacharya. He was born in a Brahmin family. His father was a priest in the local temple. M.N. Roy, as he came to be known later on, Manvendranath Roy, he started taking part in underground revolutionary activities at an early age of 14 years under the leadership of Jatin Mukherjee, who could be called his political guru. He had formed Anushilan Samiti, of which M.N. Roy became an important part. That was at the age of 14. In 1915, Roy traveled to Indonesia, Java, as Charles A. Martin to procure arms from German agents to overthrow the British rule from India. Now, in this, he is similar to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who had also decided to throw out the British government which was ruling the country at that time. And for that purpose, he wanted an armed revolution to take place against the Britishers. M.N. Roy also proceeded on the same lines. He also had the wish to procure arms from uh, people who were opposed to the British government from Germany specifically. And he traveled to so many countries in search of people who could help him in his project. But Netaji Subhash was ultimately successful in getting the favor of Japan, and with their help, he formed NIA. So that he launched an armed struggle against the Britishers. But M.N. Roy was not that lucky, and he traveled to so many countries in his search, but ultimately this failure to procure arms from the Germans, he felt that without these arms, with fewer people with him, it was not an easy job to throw out the British government which was ruling half the world at that time. So he traveled to San Francisco in the US in June 1916, where he met Evelyn Trent, a faithful woman, and from there he moved to New York, where he met Lala Lajpat Roy. It was there that he adopted the new name of Manavendranath Roy to blur his identity. When he was in the US, World War began, and he was charged with anti government activities. The reason was that he was opposing the British government and, of course, the US government also. When he found it difficult to work in the US, he slipped to Mexico. There also, farmers and workers were fighting together against American and British exploitation. There he led the Mexican freedom struggle, which was ultimately successful. There he became part of the Socialist Party, which was converted to Communist Party of Mexico by his efforts, and thus he became one of the founders of the first Communist Party out of the USSR in 1919. Of course, in 1917, the USSR had become a communist country. After the Russian Revolution, his fame reached Lenin in Russia, and he was invited to Moscow by Lenin in 1920. He went there, became Lenin's comrade and friend. He became an important and strong member of the Communist International, played a very significant role in its decision making. There he was assigned mission Tashkent, and in Tashkent on October 17th, 1920, he established India House and a military school, and there he laid the foundation of Indian Communist Party of India. After Lenin's death in 1927, he developed some differences with Stalin, and he was turned out of the Communist International in 1929. In between, he had also been assigned the job of going to China so that he could help the Chinese people in establishing the Communist Party there, Communist Party of China. Of course, that mission was not successful, and ultimately, in December 1930, he returned to India incognito. The reason being that earlier in India also he had been named in a case, Kanpur conspiracy case, and the police had been looking for him. But since he was not here, he could not be arrested earlier. But when he returned to India, an old friend reported the matter to the police, and in July 1931, about 6 months after his return, he was arrested. The case of Kanpur conspiracy had been filed in 1924. In the case, he was given a punishment of 12 years in jail. But later on, the High Court remitted half of his jail term, and in about 6 years he came out of jail on 20th of November 1936 from Dehradun jail. He was very well welcomed by the public of the city, and he was taken to the residence of Khurshid Lal, who was chairman of the municipality of Dehradun and a well-known Congress leader. Now, at this moment, I would like to mention that from Delhi I shifted to Dehradun about 4 years and a half ago. I had been to the house where M.N. Roy was living at 13 Mohini Road. That was his address. I had been to that place a few times earlier also. But after shifting to Dehradun, I again went there. I talked to some people there to know whether people remembered him there. This is the house where 13 Mohini Road, where M.N. Roy lived till his death in 1954. And he and his wife, who later, of course, I'll talk about her also. Roy died on 25th of January 1954, and his wife Ellen Roy, who had come to Dehradun and married him, and both of them were laid to rest. And this is the resting place of both M.N. Roy and Ellen Roy. And the samadhi of both these people. Now, when I talked to some people there, nobody seemed to know M.N. Roy. Now, I was surprised that such an important person who was a freedom fighter had lived there from 1936 to 1954. In that house, a big house of course, but people did not seem to know him. After 71 years, of course, 70 years, 71 years, it is not easy to remember people. But such an important freedom fighter, intellectual, philosopher, writer of so many books on democracy, etc., is not known. Therefore, I thought it would be better if we launch programs through which we can remember, we can recall this freedom fighter also, whose contribution is no less than the contribution of many of our freedom fighters. I shall come to the details a bit later. Now, M.N. Roy, after being released from jail, he joined the Congress party here, which was, of course, spearheading the freedom movement under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and, of course, other leaders. He attended the as a delegate in 1938. He attended the Phase 4 session of the Congress, and in 40 he developed some differences with the Congress leadership on the question of participation in World War II. Most of the Congress people were in favor of continuing the armed struggle against the British, and also non-cooperation and all that with them. But Roy had a different view. He believed that the war would render the British government very weak. Of course, you know that Japan, Germany, they were called Axis powers, and America, England, other countries who had been attacked by Germany and Japan, who were being led by Hitler. So, this war, according to Roy, would render the Britishers very weak financially as well as militarily, because Germany at that time had become very powerful with lots of war machines, aeroplanes, tanks, everything. And it had attacked these powers, these countries, with the intention of winning over the whole world and ruling over the whole world. Roy was of the opinion that when the Britishers would become very weak, they will have no option but to grant freedom to the country and go away from India. Therefore, he was of the opinion that instead of opposing the Britishers, we should be helping them in fighting the bigger enemy, Hitler of Germany and of course Japan. He thought that fighting the British would not be so difficult after some time as it would be difficult to fight the fascist Germany. And once, if they succeeded, Hitler and his army, in establishing their rule in the world, then there won't be any possibility of India attaining freedom from the German fascists. Now, that was the point of difference between the Congress and M.N. Roy. We know that history proved that M.N. Roy was correct. After the American Army Air Force threw atom bombs on 6th December on Hiroshima and later on Nagasaki also. That was in 45. The war ended. And in 47, India got its independence. So, earlier, of course, M.N. Roy, who was a Marxist, had developed a disenchantment from the communist ideology also, Marxist ideology, because he thought that individuals' freedom was more important than development under the communist rule. Decision making in communist regimes is not a democratic process. There also one or two people or a few individuals take all the decisions and they rule over the people. And all the freedoms, basic freedoms of individual, civil liberties are taken away so that development of the person, individual person becomes very difficult. For him, individual freedom was more important. He believed that the center of all human activities is and should be the human being. It should not be the development of society first and then the benefits percolating down to the individual. He believed that only free individuals can make a free society. They constitute a free society. So, the basic unit of the effort to develop human being is the human being himself. That was the difference between the two ideologies. Therefore, he abandoned communist ideology and, of course, joined the Congress party in search of India's freedom. Within the Congress, he also formed a group of people who would work for policies that would help people to develop, to attain freedom. Then, he was not only looking for political freedom, he was also looking for social freedom. from economic freedom, looking at economic freedom. In fact, he had also made a draft constitution of India, which provided for those things. In 1940, he also floated a political party known as Radical Democratic Party with the aim of working for the freedom not only of the country but of the individual also. He and some of his friends also fought an election in India, but he did not get any success. And later on, he decided to abandon that path also because he felt that it was not for him to fight elections and uh, try to bring about change in society through that. Because elections have always been an affair of money and muscle. Although today it is only money and muscle, earlier also it had some such influences. So in 1948, at the Calcutta conference of the party, the Radical Democratic Party was disbanded. But before that, after abandoning Marxism, Roy had floated an ideology called the Radical Humanist Ideology, which in Hindi means Nav Manavvad, or we can describe it as scientific humanism. His humanism was based on scientific principles. He believed that science was necessary in bringing about the change in society or individual which he was looking for. And he worked for that ideology throughout his life. In fact, uh, he had started a weekly news magazine called Independent India when he was fighting for the independence of India. Later on, that magazine was changed to the Radical Humanist in 1970. This is the magazine that he started. The Radical Humanist, and this is M.N. Roy. He himself was the editor of that magazine, and later on, so many other people worked as editors of this magazine. The prominent people who worked as editors of this magazine from April 70 onwards, first of course was M.N. Roy, then his wife Ellen Roy, Then another scholar, Shivnarayan Ray, Justice V.M. Tarkunde, Justice R.A. Jahagirdar, Dr. R.M. Pal, who was principal of Rajdhani College in Delhi, Sangeeta Mall, Dr. Rekha Saraswat, and of course this magazine from February 2015 is being edited by Mahipal Singh. Now, when he was living at Dehradun in June 1952, Roy met with an accident at Mussoorie, but he came out of that accident. In August 53, he received cerebral thrombosis, and this attack again came and he suffered from it the second time, and on 25th of January 1954 he breathed his last. He was a revolutionary, a visionary, a philosopher, and a person with humanist ideology. He has written more than 40 books through which he has talked of his ideology. He favored democracy, individual freedom, civil liberties, and he was strongly opposed to fascism because he considered it to be one of the greatest dangers to the human freedom. So, on 25th of January 1954, he died, and he left the unfinished work to his followers, who were, of course, thousands in number at that time. His wife, Mrs. Ellen Roy, continued to carry out the work he had left, but in 1960, she was murdered in that very house. But the work continued. Professor Shivnarayan Ray, Justice P.M. Tarkunde, and so many of his colleagues continued the work left behind by him. A society, Indian Renaissance Institute, was also formed at that time to carry on this work, which is still continuing to work. Of course, fewer people are left who are looking after the work. But so long as there are people, even if fewer in number, we need not be skeptical and we hope that the work left behind by him will be continued. We shall be making efforts to put more videos on this channel, and we shall be talking about his books, his ideology, so that more and more people know about M.N. Roy, his work, his ideology. Although Roy is taught in political science in various universities, but apart from that educational course, we don't hear about Roy and his work in society to a great extent. So let us continue his work, and we hope that even with the help of fewer people, we will be able to continue this work. Thank you.